movies from various genres and decades. Stay tuned for this episode. All right, we are in the new year, and we got this. I think it's going to be a good episode called "My Favorite Obscure Horror Movies." And I mean, I had a big list, so I had to narrow it down to 5, which was kind of difficult, but I think,
Well, we'll have a part 2, right? At some
yeah,
point.
I hope so, because I just
good.
remembered a movie I meant to add.
Uh-oh. All right,
but I'm not going to add it now.
No, well, then I'll have you take it away.
All right, so I'm starting out going chronologically once again back in 1935 with Condemned to Live. And it's funny, before we started recording, Ron here mentioned The Wizard of Oz, and there's a Wizard of Oz connection to this movie. It's really good. It stars Ralph Morgan, who is the brother of Frank Morgan, who played the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. Most people remember Frank when they see him, but they don't recognize Ralph. They kind of feel like he looks kind of familiar, but I can't quite place him. It's because they're probably associating him with his brother, the Wizard of Oz. But Ralph Morgan was actually a pretty accomplished actor in his own right. He did a lot of B movies, and he's really outstanding in them. I mean, I don't know why he wasn't bigger in the horror genre. He's really good. He's played mad scientist. In this one, they're in a small town, and there's a cave nearby, and it may or may not have a vampire. But they keep it real vague, because there's a lot of logical explanations for the way people are dying. But, the townfolk think it's a vampire, right? Because they got, it's a small town, they're kind of backward, and there's a lot of folklore about vampires in the area. It's the first time I saw it, I had to see it again because it's a poverty row, very low budget. And it was one of those where I was like, was that as good as I thought it was? So I watched it a couple more times, and I think I'm finally convinced this thing's a keeper. It's really good. It doesn't really have anyone else of note. Most of those poverty rows that survive to today that people remember, and this is why it's obscure, have Bela Lugosi or Boris Karloff slumming it in these cheap little studios just off Hollywood. But this one doesn't have any of those people. So you think, it's not going to be much. You watch it, and it's like, this thing's pretty good. So I highly recommend it. It's called, and Ralph Morgan is Condemned to Live. So that's my first movie. And the Wizard of Oz connection.
Yeah, sounds good.
This sounds interesting.
I like that. May or may not be a vampire. It's like
I can't tell you because it actually is revealed in the end. But there are people dying in vampire-like ways with holes, So I don't want to give it away, but it's. I would highly recommend it as far as poverty row horrors go.
All right, Jerry, you're up.
Okay, so I am going to start it off with a movie from 1969. Now, I'm going to be curious to know if you guys have heard of any of these movies or seen them. The movie I'm doing, the first one is The House That Screamed. Really, have you heard of it? Have you seen it?
I've definitely heard of it, actually. I have heard of it. I don't know if
it's an odd title for the movie. And as I understand it, this was the very first Spanish movie that was done in English. And the story centers around a school for girls. And it's a really slow moving story. And it almost got an X rating when they released it in the US, which is, watching the uncut version, you really can't understand why. Yes, there's some simulated sex and there are some salacious scenes with these girls, but they're never nude. So it's like really the whole X thing was different at the time, but they had to cut some stuff from it to get it, out released without the X rating. But the story is this woman runs this school for girls, and she is a very strict authoritarian, and she sort of meets out some sadomasochistic punishment against these girls, and there's some sort of almost lesbian sadomasochistic stuff going on there, or at least implied. It isn't really there, but it's implied, very heavily implied. She has this young son, like a teenage son, who's kind of voyeuristic, and he's not really allowed to be around the girls, but he peeks in on them a lot. And there's also this guy who does deliveries to the place, and when he shows up to do deliveries, he goes and has sex with one of the girls, different girl each time, and the girls start disappearing. And the movie has almost the way the slasher part of it is, which it was a very early slasher movie. The way the slasher part of it plays out, it really reminds me a little bit of Black Christmas. It's got that sort of vibe, but the ending, the whole movie is worth the ending. The ending is like one of those twist endings, as big a twist ending as Psycho. And it's just like, once you see it, oh, okay, now I know how it ends, which is so obviously I'm not revealing the ending, but the ending is one of those that just completely twists the whole movie around. And that's why I like the movie so much, is for that ending. It all builds up, but you really don't see it coming. Very bizarre movie, but also very cool.
It's been a while since actually. It's been a while since I've seen it. I want to say back into like the 80s when I was working at the video store.
Yeah.
I just like take movies off the shelf, whether I heard about them or not. Just used to go through the horror section, the cult section, and read like four movies on a Friday, 4 on a Saturday, and I would watch. I'd have a marathon every night, just one after another. But
there used to be a video store in my area that had 5 movies for $5 on Wednesdays or something. You keep them for a week, so they go.
Oh, nice.
So I used to do that sometimes too. I think I might have seen that one a long time, or one very similar to it anyway. One interesting note on that X rating, I believe 69 is very early in the rating system. I don't remember if it's started in either 67 or 69, somewhere in there. So they were probably still trying to find those boundaries of where that X rating belongs. So that might be why it,
right. And then what it wound up with was a GP rating, which what was that? General.
Yeah, that's like general public. That's like PG today. It's equivalent.
Yeah. After they made some cuts to it anyway.
Of course.
I think they cut maybe 7 or 8 minutes out of it. Basically, I think the majority of it came from a shower scene that they cut, which, I mean, admittedly, some of the stuff in there was intentionally there for the sex value. And that scene was one of them. I mean, yeah, you saw the kid, peeking in on them, but the scene was far longer than it needed to be.
Right.
Exploitation films were big at the time, too. It was getting a little exploitative. Exactly. Like a Vampire's Night Orgy, which really doesn't have an orgy. They threw it in a title which is also a Spanish film now that I think about it.
All right. Well, my first pick is from 1973, and it's called Horror Hospital. And Horror Hospital is basically this burned out rock star needed a place to decompress before, I guess the next tour or the next album. And he was recommended this place. And it turns out that this place has a doctor there that is performing experiments on the patients. And they have this, I'll use the politically correct term, little person. He would come out and he would, to announce people, he would come out and bang on a gong, and it was very British. I mean, absurd. And it just turns out I had 2 motorcyclists that were like the security And it was, I remember when I first saw this movie, it was on late night TV, and it was just kind of spooky that you go into this hospital and it's like a very sinister vibe going on. And I remember the actor that played the doctor, Michael Gow. I think that's how to pronounce his name.
Go, actually. I believe it's Go.
Okay. Yeah, he
just
plays
Is that the guy who was Alfred in the Michael Keaton Batman movies?
Indeed, it was. Yes,
Yeah.
he did a lot of British horror movies in the as far back as the 50s, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, he did a lot. And this was one that was kind of on the more, I guess it would really classified as exploitative because it's just, I mean, there was really, aside from some killings, there was really not anything that can get it past our PG-13 nowadays. But back then, 1973, it was pretty out there. And I was so happy when I found it on Blu-ray. It's the clamshell box is like a little bit thicker than the rest of the normal ones. And I think it's one of those region, what is it, B movies. So, but it was really, really, really good. If you like that British vibe to it, I mean, I think that the actor that plays the rock star I think he's the same one that was in another one called Psychomania, which I wish I picked that. That's next one. But this one is good. Okay, like you like British horror of the 70s. This is one to pick up and check out. I mean, and for you people that it's on YouTube, so you can buy it. It's not a great copy, so if you like it, I think you'll wind up buying it. And that was my first pick.
I was just cheating and looking at IMDb. Dennis Price also has a small part in that, who is a future Dr. Frankenstein for Hammer.
Oh, nice.
Eventually, so. All right, back to me.
Yeah, back to you.
Oh.
Back to you.
You can continue if you want. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Number 2, I am going to 1969, and later I will be in Spain, actually. So, but I'm going to Japan now. I had to do at least one Japanese movie in this thing.
Of course you did.
I had to. My question was, how obscure do I want to go? So I chose this one because I rewatched it not too long ago. I posted on my group, Classic Camps, Classic Horror Emporium, and some people were saying, where'd you get a copy? And I'm like, well, actually, it's from a few years ago. Latitude Zero, because apparently it's hard to find these days. It's out of print. So maybe me doing this will inspire somebody to put it back in print somewhere. But it's kind of a battle between two submarines. A journalist gets picked up by one submarine, which is captained by Cesar Romero. Later on, the Joker in Batman's, well, actually, this is shortly after he was Joker in Batman, now that I think about it, 69, 68 it ends. Anyway, and he's kind of the bad guy, and they later meet another guy in another submarine, Joseph, which is captained by Joseph Cotton, who did a lot of B movies in the 60s and 70s, but is probably best remembered as the best friend of Citizen Kane, AFI's #1 movie of all time, Joseph Cotton. He did a lot of European and Japanese. Of course, this is the American version that I'm watching, which I do actually have the Japanese version, but I haven't seen it yet. It's a lot of fantasy. They wind up on some crazy islands. One of them has giant flying lions that attack them. They do a lot of battles on this. They really rather ridiculous looking lions, actually. But, in the fantasy world of Toho, somehow they make sense. There's like a lot of things in Toho that just seem so weird, but it's one of those things, if you watch enough Toho movies, it makes perfect sense again somehow. I'm not sure how that works, but anyway.
There's like a different mindset, a different universe for those movies.
It is. They did a world building thing that if you take the time to enter that world, lot of this crazy stuff really just makes perfect sense over there, and this is one of them. It's a lot more fantasy than it is science fiction, even though there are submarines with science fiction and everything, unlike unlike a lot of the Toho movies. But it's really good. It has a lot of the 20,000 Leagues influence, I'm sure. The Cesar Romero character, particularly, actually it almost follows the book for about a good half hour or so. um, but I find it a really enjoyable one. Of course, I love all the Toho stuff, but this was in their peak, by the way, in '69, towards the end of the peak period. By 1970, they started to cut budgets that weren't really that big to begin with. But it's a fun little fantasy horror sci-fi type thing if you can find it. I think mine was on. Oh, I don't have it with me. It was not Anchor Bay. I was thinking Anchor Bay. It wasn't them. It was Tokyo something was the version that I had. But again, it's out of print anyway. So hopefully somebody brings it back. I don't even think it's streaming anywhere that I know of. So it's a harder one to find right now. What's that?
It probably isn't.
Yeah, I think I checked not too long ago and it wasn't. Some of those more obscure Toho ones are a little hard to find. The Human Vapor, I looked everywhere until I found that one. I had to settle for streaming. I couldn't find it anywhere on video anywhere. And some of them are falling out. I don't think the H-Man is available right now anywhere. But anyway, it's one of those fun little Toho movies that I like. If you like those Toho things, you want something a little more obscure. Doesn't have the giant Godzilla type things. The lions are slightly larger than human size, but there's like 100 of them.
Of course.
That they have to fight. So and escape from on one of the crazy islands that they go to. So I would highly recommend that one as well. Latitude Zero.
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
It's a good one if you can catch it.
All right. Well, that brings us back to me, I guess. And my second one, I'm going to 1972 and an odd movie called Terror at Red Wolf Inn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this one, but it's actually, a lot of people call it the first horror comedy, but I don't see that at all. There is some comedy there. There are some funny moments, but I don't think it's a comedy at all. It's very much a horror movie. This girl gets a phone call that she's won a trip to some like a vacation at this inn, and they're going to pay for everything. They're going to fly her there, and everything. And so she goes, and she finds there are these other girls staying there. One girl, it's her last night, and it's this bizarre little inn. Everybody's kind of friendly, but there's a son who's a little weird, and they have like this really odd relationship with food in the movie. Like they have this almost an orgy of food at at the table, and they're feeding these girls constantly, and they're like really the way they react to the food is just bizarre. It's like I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's like an unnatural way they're dealing with the food. But it gets even weirder because this is one of the earliest cannibal movies. And they're actually killing the girls and using them, butchering them for food. And this, by the way, predates Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it actually has a member of the family who's a police officer, which makes me wonder if that was an inspiration on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I've never, ever seen anybody, make that connection. And it's not as dark as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, although it does get pretty gross. And
you made the connection now, so you may be the first.
Maybe I made it when I reviewed the movie too. And it's got more comedy, more humor. It's a lot lighter movie, but even the humor has a real dark, twisted side to it a lot of the time. You can always tell there's something darker going on there. It's a really sort of a lost, forgotten film, but it is so interesting, I think. It's a fun movie. And, it was probably pretty low budget at the time, and it, has that early 70s look and feel. And I don't think the copies of it were all that well preserved. So it looks dated just because of the picture quality and stuff. But it's a definitely worth watching, both from a historical point of view and because it's just very entertaining.
That was another one I watched in the video store days. Yeah, it's been a while, so I'm gonna look that back up. So you got 2 for 2. You said we weren't gonna get a, you know.
Yeah, you've seen both of them so far.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go probably the most modern one I've done yet, and it's called The Dead. It's from 2010. It is a zombie movie, and what I liked about it that it did something a little different, not groundbreaking, but instead of in heavy populated cities or it was set in Africa. A pilot crashes in Africa, and all of a sudden he just sees around him these zombies that are coming at him. So he's going across Africa trying to get to safety, and it's like, and at moments you're like, he has like close calls with getting bit, and you can't. It's one of those movies that you're getting anxious with it because you want the guy to get to safety because he's a pretty likable character. And they made a sequel, but the sequel wasn't as good. I don't really think that they brought anything new to it because they set it in India. But this one in Africa, I thought it was original for what the zombie movies that are coming out at the time. Usually the zombie movies around this time were kind of silly, So this one, if you can find it, it's a really good one. Especially if you love zombies, and it's not one that a lot of people know about because I was looking it up to see if anybody's done it. There's a few people that have talked about it, but it's good. If you love zombie movies, this is one you should pick up.
It sounds like a good one too. Okay, I'm up for number 3. My third movie, I'm going to Spain now. When you said obscure, I knew I had to throw in a Paul Naschy movie. I haven't done one of his in a little while, so I wanted to do one of the more obscure ones. So I chose The Mummy's Revenge, 1975. None of Naschy's movies really have a big budget. Their biggest plus, though, is that he films in his hometown of Spain, right? In his home country, I should say, of Spain. And, so instead of going to making a set of a big castle, he just walks into a castle in Spain and films. The only thing wrong with this one is it's a mummy movie. So he doesn't need a Spanish castle. He needs Egyptian ruins. And this really exposes his budget limitations, unfortunately. But it's still kind of a fun movie. He does go through all of the usual mummy tropes. They have flashbacks into ancient Egypt and how the person was entombed and becomes a mummy and comes back later on and goes on his killing spree. It's just interesting to see Naschy try to go through all of the universal monsters and try to replicate them in his home country with his budget and still modernize them, and he does that fairly well. And they do the headdresses and everything, the whole 9 yards. It's a pretty good Naschy movie. It's still worth watching if you've already seen his best work. I wouldn't start with this one, but if you've seen Frankenstein's Bloody Terror and uh, Werewolf versus the Vampire Women, and you've already seen Simon Terror, which is also known as Dracula versus Frankenstein, which I did cover in a previous episode. Uh, this could be a nice next step. It's not going to win any awards, but it's a decent picture to see what he did with the mummy trope. I mean, he only did one vampire movie, really. Well, where he plays a vampire, I should say. Werewolf versus the Vampire Women. Um, and that was Count Dracula's Greatest Love, is the one where he plays a vampire. So it was kind of nice to see him try his hand over here at the mummy trope, which I don't think gets enough love to begin with either. Uh, so it's the Mummy's Revenge, 75. You're getting a little bit further away from Naishi's peak period, but not too far away that it starts to really get almost like somebody holding a hand cam kind of thing. It's not quite that going that down yet, as he does in the later 70s, early 80s. And then he comes back in the 90s with actually some really good stuff, which I'll probably cover in another episode one day.
Hey. Sounds interesting. I like that. What was that? Frankenstein versus the Werewolf Women?
Werewolf versus the Vampire Women. And then he also had Dracula versus Frankenstein, that's really a terrible title for that one. But yeah, Werewolf versus the Vampire Women. That's actually one of his best films, believe it or not.
I love the title. I mean, just that alone would make me want to look for it.
I'll have to cover that one. I don't think I've done that one yet for this show. I'll probably have to cover that one at some point. It's actually one of his most popular ones because it became episodes of Elvira, and all the hosted horror movie shows did that, covered that one. I believe it went in, I don't know if it's a public domain or not, I should say one way or the other, but a lot of the hosted horror movie shows that do public domain movies did that one. So maybe it is. I don't know. That's considered one of his better ones, though.
Okay.
But the Mummy's Revenge, after you've seen those, not a bad next chapter when you're, going through the Naishi list. And it is on Tubi, by the way. When I was searching it for this episode, I said, "Hey, it's on Tubi." They've released a bunch of Naishi movies now.
Cool. All right, well, that brings us back around to me, and I'm going to jump way ahead to 2023 and a movie called The Ones You Didn't Burn. This movie,
titles.
Yeah, this movie is a very interesting movie in a lot of ways. It's slow, okay? It's a slow burn, but it's also very artistic in a lot of ways. I mean, the scenes, some of the scenes are beautiful, even though I don't think they had a huge budget when they made it. As you might imagine from the title, it's a witch-based movie. This father dies, and his two kids, a girl and a son, who are basically estranged from the father and estranged from each other. There's obviously some history there, like the son was an addict of some kind, and there was a lot of trouble, and the family sort of fell apart, partly because of that, partly because I think the father was a jerk. But they find out they've inherited the family home and the family farm, and they go there, and these two women, these two girls, probably in their 20s maybe, are working there, and they worked for the father, and they stay there, and they sort of befriend the sister, but not so much befriend the brother, and tensions start to build between the brother and the sister, and it's very much a snowball kind of movie, and it gets really trippy at times in a really cool way. And obviously, as I said, it involves witches. I will say this about it. Here's one of the things I really liked about it. As someone who was a Wiccan for a time period and has really studied a lot of the pagan, religions, or for lack of a better word, the practices, I guess. So many movies get it so wrong. And if you know anything about like a lot of different rituals and things, and if you watch this movie, there are just little things that they're not really right there. They're sort of off to the side. You'll see them doing something and you're like, oh, I know what they're doing. And it's like, that's definitely Wiccan, and and here's the other thing. The witches are seeking revenge, but they're also the victims. They were definitely the victims, and they're seeking revenge for being victims. And that's what makes them frightening. If they hadn't been victimized, they would have been perfectly fine, and they would have been,
Right.
but they're malevolent because they're seeking vengeance, and they're seeking retribution for what was done to them. And I really like that about the movie. It's a different take than you see in a lot of witch movies. Um, it's a lot more realistic and a lot more. I don't know. I guess it just fits well with what the reality is. I mean, like there's the old things of everybody fears the witches, but they don't fear the people who burned them. And this is
Right.
The people who burned them were the bad ones.
So you're saying this one kind of gets the Wiccan aspect correct.
Yes,
Gets it
very
right,
much so.
for the most part.
It's-
Yeah.
I wasn't deep into it, but enough that I spotted a lot of things when I was watching it. I'm like, I know what that is,
Yeah.
and they don't really talk about them, but you see it there, and you're like, okay, somebody knew
Somebody knew what they
something
were
who was
doing.
doing this
Yeah.
movie.
It's interesting because that was kind of my problem with The Conjuring was they got it wrong. They got a lot of the Wick. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
super versed in the Wiccan stuff, but I know a
yeah.
little. That one definitely gets it wrong.
Oh yeah, this one
So
gets a lot of stuff right. It's
yeah,
actually, I highly recommend this movie. Actually, like I say, very slow burn. There are some really weird scenes that are trippy that you're going to go, what the hell just happened? But it gets a lot of stuff really right, and there's some beautiful scenery in it too.
that sounds up my alley too. I like that
Yeah.
gothic kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. It almost could be also classified as folk horror.
Yes, yeah, definitely folk horror. I think.
And speaking of that, there's a box set out there. It's like 150 or so dollars, almost $200, and it has like 20 different folk horror movies in it. And if I had the money, I'd get it because I've seen quite a few of them, and they're pretty good. I mean, atmosphere, which is what's cool about them. All right. My next one is we're going to go down under to Australia, 1978, Patrick. Patrick kind of falls in the same lines in the Carrie style movies where he kills his parents and he goes into a coma. And from his coma, he's using psychokinetic powers and to do stuff. Actually, they say he leaves his body and he goes everywhere. And one of the most creepiest scenes is where the new nurse was there checking on him, and she's kind of getting closer to him, and he spat on her, right? And it's like you jump back when you feel that because you can only imagine how that would have felt. And I guess the actor that played Patrick has, in my opinion, a very demonic look to him without makeup or anything, just the way his face is. It's like it's scary. You don't want to be in that alley with this guy. That type of scare. They did make a sequel in Italy. It was called Patrick Still Lives. It has nothing to do with it. It's almost like it's a remake. And then they did do a remake in 2013, which I don't know if I saw it or not, but this one was really good. Exploitation. It was the director, the writer. It was his second longest script after after something called The Long Weekend, and it was this one was pretty good. If you like the Carrie style movies, I mean, you should check this one out.
I've seen trailers before. It looked interesting.
Like
Yeah,
I
I
said,
haven't
this is
seen
another
that.
one. This is another one that's on YouTube. So if you like it, if you see it on YouTube, go and buy it. You know, because you got to support
And
the industry.
is that The Long Weekend, the old movie that that they also
From
wrote?
1978 or
Okay.
somewhere
Yeah,
somewhere in that.
I might be thinking of The Lost Weekend, actually.
Oh, yeah.
A different
I
movie.
think now either one of those is the movie about where nature gets back at the couple because they're
Okay.
like littering and just being total a-holes, you know, towards, and nature gets back at them. But this one was pretty good. I mean, it has a very dark vibe to it. Not terrible amount of violence, but a lot of it is just, you know, kind of like implying it that this is, you know, his power that he has. So that is my number 3. That's Patrick from 1978.
Okay. Okay, I guess I'm up for round 4.
Yep.
So I went with a blaxploitation movie, which I haven't done too many of those lately. It's got a funny title again. Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde is my number
I
4
have seen
movie.
this one.
You have seen this one?
Yes.
This was pretty obscure. It took me forever to find it. I finally found it on Tubi. The thing that drew me to it was it's actually directed by William Crane, who directed Blackula, which really Blackula is the gold standard of the blaxploitation movies. I mean, that is a legitimately good movie. I would
Yes,
place
it is.
Blackula in the top 20 horror movies of all time, at least classic ones anyway, older movies.
And the sequel's not bad either.
It's not terrible. No, it's
Not as good,
decent.
but it's not bad.
Yeah, it's definitely watchable. Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, I confess, I did watch it because I thought it was going to be so terrible I could make fun of it. But it actually wasn't that bad. It makes me wish William Crane made more movies because he really didn't do that many. Because it's not terrible at all. It's totally logical, you know, in the realm of its own sphere, of its own universe. It's the universe that it's created. The plot is a doctor is trying to make a serum, black doctor. He's trying to make a serum that replaces liver cells, I think it is, or something like that. I was kind of cheating a little bit on that part. But anyway, but he uses himself as the guinea pig. He turns into a vicious monster. It happens to be albino. So we're going to use those racial tensions in the 1970s. This is 1976, by the way, 1 year after my last movie, The Mummy's Revenge. And so he goes on a killing spree, back and forth. But, you know, people's reactions are fairly logical to what they would be when they have a monster trying to kill them, which isn't always there in a lot of terrible B movies of the 70s. It's very low budget, much lower than Blackula. It's still slightly better than Blackenstein, which I've seen as well, which that one I've seen quite a few times. It's a little bit better than that one. But you can tell he pretty much just had a movie camera and was filming on the streets, probably near where he lived or something, or went to New York or something in a big city. Urban horror. It is during the height of that blaxploitation where you were getting a lot of the cop movies like Shaft and Superfly and a lot of the Pam Grier movies were popular during that era. So it's during the peak of all that, Coffee and Foxy Brown and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's not that bad. I kind of watched it late at night, and I think I need to watch it when I'm a little bit more awake this time because it was decent. I was kind of disappointed at how good it was, actually. So I kind of just wanted some, just this sounds stupid enough, but it wasn't bad. So Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde, and directed by William Crane, who didn't direct a lot of films. He should have done more, because the ones that he did, I found very entertaining and logically shot, very well shot films. Very talented person. He's still with us. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Sounds interesting.
And I believe it's on Tubi also. I believe that's where I finally found it.
Yeah, Tubi seems to be a great source of movies. I mean, I have a friend of mine back home in California. He swears by it. He had all these other streaming sites. He got rid of them. He says, I live for Tubi.
I tell you, one thing with Tubi that I really find interesting is their algorithm. I don't know how they do it, but they find, once you watch a couple movies on Tubi, they find other movies that really are up your alley, much better than any of the other streaming services I've ever found. Usually their suggestions after I've watched a couple of movies is nothing I have any interest in, but Tubi somehow, everyone should find a significant other that knows them the way Tubi knows them. It's my suggestion. Tubi knows you somehow.
I haven't really delved too much into the site. I have it up on my Roku TV. I have seen a couple of them, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
If you don't mind the commercials.
Yeah, well, they do have commercials, but so does cable television. So
yeah, but the commercials are a lot shorter, which is nice.
They are. Yeah, they are. I think they're 2.5 minutes tops is like the longest ever. Usually it's sometimes as little as 30 seconds.
Right.
My last movie will be a Tubi movie as well, by the way. So just a sneak peek. I believe a Tubi exclusive, in fact.
I think we should hashtag this episode Tubi.
There you go.
Well, I don't know if any of my movies are on Tubi.
That first one might be.
It might be, yeah.
Might be. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look it up.
Okay, so that brings us back around to me for my fourth, and I'm sticking with the year 2023, and I'm doing a movie called Terror Firma, as opposed to Terra Firma, Terror Firma. Very interesting movie. When I saw the description of the film, I thought it was going to be sort of a takeoff on Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The setup, and this, after all of us went through the year 2020, we can relate to this, and I'm guessing that's when they wrote this. All we know is I think it's in Los Angeles. I don't remember for sure if they established that or not. But we don't know whether this is a worldwide thing or a national thing or what. But they're in a state of ordered lockdown. You are not allowed to leave your home, period. You will be arrested if you leave your home. And they drop off these massive skids of food and supplies for every home once a week so that you've got everything you need. You don't have to leave. And this guy and his roommate live in this house, and the one guy's sort of estranged sister shows up to stay with them. And so the whole movie pretty much takes place in this one house and those three characters. Now, the roommate is a creepazoid, and he's very creepy kind of guy. He acts like he's some kind of shaman or something, and all he does it to, score with girls, basically. And he puts the moves on the sister. But what happens is their very first shipment, and we don't know what this emergency is that everything's locked down for. They never established that, although I'm pretty sure we figure that out pretty shortly on. The first skid of stuff they get, they notice it's been tampered with. The shrink wrap on the outside's been tampered with, and the girl reaches in and pulls out a packet of seeds. She's like, "What are these?" And so she plants one of the seeds, and it grows like super fast. And then it suddenly just drops down into the ground and leaves like this liquid in the hole where it was. And they all wind up tasting the liquid. And it's like whatever it is that that person likes the most is what it tastes like to them. It just tastes like the most amazing thing, but it tastes like something else to everybody. And from there, the movie starts to get really weird. The people start to change. But rather than being sort of an invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing, there's almost a Lovecraftian, like different worlds colliding and stuff like that. There are like different dimensions that you can pass through, and it is crazy cool. And it's a little confusing at times, but in a good way, where you're just sort of going, "What did I just see?" And they're it's just and I'm amazed at what they were able to do on what was obviously a small budget, which is why they had the very limited set and the limited cast. But yeah, it's a really, really cool movie. And it's another that's a snowball. Starts kind of slow, but once it gets going, wow.
Sounds like a good one too.
Yeah. All right. Well, my fourth one comes from 1988, and it's called Bad Dreams, and it's billed as a supernatural mystery slasher film. It has actress Jennifer Rubin. I'm not sure if you know her. Bruce Abbott, E.G. Daly, that little, I guess, pint-sized girl that she's kind of ditzy. And it also has Harris Yulin and Richard Lynch. And it follows a woman who awakens from a 13-year coma and finds herself stalked by the ghost of a cult leader who led a mass suicide by fire. So it has like a Freddy Krueger vibes, that he comes to her in the dreams. And I guess some people might say ripoff, but it's just a little bit different. I mean, Richard Lynch, whenever he plays a bad guy, it's always kind of fun. Those bad guys are amazing that the way they torment you. But I actually remember going into the movie theater to watch this. I didn't remember it after that for the longest time, and then when it came out on Blu-ray as a double feature with my final film, it was like, okay, this is actually pretty good. I mean, it has one-liners. I mean, that seems to have been a thing in the 80s. You got to have the killer do one-liners, with the exception of Jason and Michael Myers. They never, maybe they were thinking of it, but but it's actually really good. I mean, if you like 80s slasher films, I mean, I was on a kick with those. Anything slasher, beyond the usual suspects. I always wanted to find something different. So if you're looking for something that is talked about very little, I didn't find anything about it. So it may not, may have just been, fallen through the seams of cinema. But it's on a Shout Factory, either Shout or Screen Factory release, and it's a double feature. So you get two good movies with it, and the final, like I said, the final one is part of this. So I kind of let those at the end.
Listen, I've seen that one before. It's been probably since the 80s since I've seen it, but I
Yeah.
remember that one. I remember it being kind of a rocking movie too. Like it just sort of had that 80s sort of rock vibe to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
it
I
was
guess.
fun. I remember that.
Hmm.
All right. Well, that is my number four.
Okay, back around to me for my final film.
Yep.
This is a small, locally made film, which we don't have too many of those anymore. But Tubi does, believe it or not. I know that because I know the guy who made this film. I went to high school with him. And,
Oh,
Len Kabasinski, he does movies in Erie, Pennsylvania, although this one was partially filmed in Philadelphia. He's done a number of movies now. This one's Swamp Zombies 2, not to be confused with his original Swamp Zombies, which I have not located yet. But and he's really not bad. For it kind of does have some of that charm of some of the old locally made films. I mean, we've talked about a few of them. Night of the Living Dead was originally a locally made film that blew up. Um, Carnival of Souls was another one out west. Was a locally made film that blew up. But this one, he also has a special guest who I'm wearing the T-shirt. Plays a mad scientist. He's another horror movie host, Mr. Lobo, is in that movie in the very beginning. I'm watching it. I'm like, oh my God, he's got Mr. Lobo in. Another guy that I actually do know in the real life 3D world too, because he's always at Monster Fest. And I say hi to him. I've written articles on him. I interviewed Mr. Lobo for Wormwood Chronicles. There's another plug. Somebody I like to plug every chance I get.
Yes.
He's in some of those archives. But it's a zombie movie, obviously. Um, Mr. Lobo is part of the scientific thing. I don't remember what they're experimenting on, but they create zombies, and the zombies go out and are killing everyone. And Len Kabasinski, my friend I went to high school with, is a kung fu master who fights the zombies, and he really is well trained in kung fu. I do have to stress that he's actually a kung fu teacher. He's gone to competitions and he's legitimately won at least some of these competitions. He's a legitimate black belt. So he does show off some of his moves in all of his movies. A number of them are available on Tubi. This, I confess, is the only one I've seen so far. But I do have to search out a few of his others because this one was actually very entertaining. It's a little tongue in cheek. He does throws a little humor in there as well. And there is, some gratuitous nudity. I don't know where he gets them from, but whatever. So, for the kiddies out there, you might not want to let them see it, um, but it really wasn't too bad. I'm always interested in people that I've met or known in the real life 3D world, or even online on Facebook or whatever, to see if they've done anything creative, written, performed, whatever. I'm interested in seeing that. And I was actually, this is, better than I expected. Certainly low budget for its time, but it's a decent movie. It's probably something like some of the movies Gary's talked about, and some of these things anyway, I would imagine. But I imagine it was probably somewhere at least on that same plateau of entertainment value. But it's pretty good though. It was decent.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, so Swamp Zombies 2, check it out if you get a chance.
Cool. Well, I guess we're up to my final one then. And I'm gonna bring it into 2024. Movie called Ghost Game. Ghost Game, again, low budget. What the only real problem with the low budget in this movie is that some of the scenes look like they're shot without any lights on at all, and it's very hard to see what's going on. It's just a few scenes, but to me, probably the thing that makes this movie the best is just the story behind it, and even just the setup is brilliant. Ghost Game is this like video sensation in the movie and it's not necessarily like out on YouTube where lots of people see it, but it's like this community, this like sort of secret community online. And what they do is they will break into someone's house and stay there for a little while and do things to make the people think the house is haunted. And they've planted cameras inside so they catch everybody's reactions to it and stuff. And that's what they call ghost game. Well, at the beginning of the movie, you find out that this woman, she gets into a big argument with the guy who was her partner in this ghost game. They have a big falling out because she's going to take her boyfriend, her new boyfriend who's never done this, into this house for ghost game. So you know there's some conflict there between the former partner. It gets more complicated because this house they're going into is supposedly where there was a massive murder suicide. This woman supposedly killed her entire family and herself in the house, and it's been sitting empty. Well, a new family has just bought it and they're going to move in, which brings another weird angle to it. The family is an author who had a book out that was like an exploitative book where it was sensationalist and it was about his daughter disappearing, and he pretended that she was kidnapped by aliens when in fact he hid her for like a few weeks, and then she was supposed to pretend that she had these stories of being held by aliens. And so now he's got a different wife and a stepdaughter who's on the autism spectrum, and they're moving into this house, which, is it haunted? Is it not haunted? We don't know. And in the meantime, this couple's going in there to do the ghost game. And I'm not going to give more than that away, except that a lot of really weird things start happening. And there are some definite twists in it. There were a couple things I did not see coming at all. So it's a pretty darn cool movie. Again, you got to sort of try your hardest to figure out what's going on in a couple of the scenes because they're so dark. But otherwise, really entertaining movie.
All right. Well, for my number 5 and final one, it was the second movie on my double feature. It's called Visiting Hours. This has Lee Grant, Michael Ironside, Linda Pearl, and William Shatner. And
William Shatner?
It's basically, yeah, and it's a Canadian film. It just focuses on a feminist journalist who becomes a target of a serial killer and who follows her home, or follows her to the hospital after attacking her in the home. So you have that, the hospital, the tension of him going after her in the hospital, which is, always nerve-wracking, because then when you go into a hospital, you're kind of looking around, at some of this for the exits and stuff. And I used to work in a hospital, so it's pretty creepy at night. This one was, like I said, it's 1982, and William Shatner. It's kind of interesting that, like, in the 70s and the 80s, he had a couple either sci-fi or horror movie appearances. Yeah.
Quite a few, actually.
And this one was on the better side. It wasn't, nothing was schlocky or, bad acting or anything. It was actually really good. And then, of course, Michael Ironside. He's, I believe that he is actually the star. And it has a big thing. Yeah, he's the stalker, and Lee Grant is the feminist journalist. So there was a couple. I think you did, Gary. You did one that was in the hospital recently. I don't remember what it was called, because it had
remember.
It had
I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, it's
We do so many
You
of
know,
these, and I do so many reviews and stuff. It just gets hard to keep track of everything.
exactly. I mean, you gotta need like a whiteboard on your behind you with check off this, check off that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this one was really good. I didn't see it in the movie theaters because it really didn't do wide wide range of theaters. It was very select. Um, Probably more so in Canada than the United States. I found it on VHS later in the decade. Um, it was a good. It's more psychological thriller than horror. I mean, obviously you got the slasher part. It's not like not very blatant. Like Friday the 13th Halloween. There's a little more story to it. That is my final.
Okay. Shatner was in everything in the late 70s and early 80s. You can almost
Yeah, he was
just
in
name a movie. He was
so
probably
many
in.
movies.
Yeah,
There's one movie, was it Terror at 37,000 Feet?
yeah.
One of my friends who I've never met in person, but when we were kids, she was she was neighbor with my uncle in New York City, and we were both about the same age, and we got to be pen pals. So I've known her, since like the '70s by mail and stuff. Before there was social media, that was our social media, sending letters back and forth. And she is in that movie. She plays a little girl on the plane with him. And she said, I think she told me, yeah, she said that one thing you don't know from seeing the movie, and she felt so terrible as this little kid. She's doing this scene with Shatner. She's supposed to be hitting him, and I think she gave him a bloody nose,
Oh my God.
which she wasn't supposed to.
Oops.
Method acting.
Yeah.
Didn't they have a skit on Saturday Night Live where he does something and he goes, "That's acting."
Probably.
But
And to be fair, I read something recently. Everybody gives Shatner so much grief for overacting and stuff. And I read what Kirstie Alley said when she went on to the Rec. She said she was new as an actor. She had no idea what she was doing. And when she got on set and she was around Shatner, she said he was such a professional that she got the feeling that he was like, why is she here? Because she's like, I forgot, I couldn't remember my lines, I wasn't finding my spots. And she's like, and he's like waiting for me constantly because I can't get it right. And so he is very much a professional, no matter what people think about him and what flack people give him.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
I think when he started, wasn't he on? He did a lot of stage work before he became really big, and I think you have to be
Yeah.
exaggerated on stage. So that's probably where some of
Yeah,
that
that's
comes
where
from.
some of it comes from. And he was doing there's an interesting in Star Trek The Undiscovered Country. Christopher Plummer plays the Klingon. Well, Christopher Plummer signed on to that movie because he and Shatner were friends because they were both in Canada and they had done Shakespeare in Canada
Yeah.
together. And so they knew each other really well. And so Shatner asked him to come do it. And so he did it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. That.
Yeah,
Well,
I like Shatner. I'll see him in anything.
Yeah, I do. I mean, you know what? When I was growing up, I was a Star Trek fanatic, and Kirk was my hero. So I liked Shatner from that. But he's in so much stuff, and he's a character, and he's also, like I said, he's a professional, and that's why he's in so much
He
stuff.
is.
He definitely gets it done.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
3 or 4
So,
episodes of Twilight Zone, too.
Yes.
oh yeah. So check out that movie. I think you'll like it. All right. Well, first episode of the new year. Um, I figure we started off, with the obscure movies, because it's been a kind of feels like an obscure year so far. Uh, without going into detail, but anyways, everyone out there, you got 15 different movies to go look for. A bunch of them are on Tubi, some of them are on YouTube. But if you can find them either on DVD or Blu-ray, it's always nice to be able to, you have friends over or something, you can go up to your shelf and pull it off. Look what I got. Let's watch it here instead of, hitting your TV remote to look for it. Plus, also it shows the sales. When you get the sales going, it kind of shows that the people actually still want movies.
And also, you guys were talking about certain movies not being available on streaming. That's the bad part about streaming. You have to rely on someone to keep it out there for you. If you buy it, you've got it. Doesn't matter what streaming service has it. Doesn't matter if none of them have it. You've got it.
Owning the physical is always superior to streaming. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
I can tell you, Len does get a little royalty when anybody watches Swamp Zombies. So Swamp Zombies too.
Yeah.
He gets a little
Swamp Zombies,
which I don't think is available on. Some of his stuff actually did used to be available on DVD. In Walmart, he was telling me, but every time I looked in Walmart, I couldn't find any of his movies. But off and on, they might be available in some Walmarts every once in a while.
While supplies last.
While
supplies last, right? I know. So I tried to find his on physical media when I could find it. When I couldn't.
Oh yeah. If you can't find it, if it's not available for whatever reason, or if it's like crazy amounts of
outrageously
money.
Expensive.
Yeah.
Somebody on Amazon has it, wants to show it off, so he's selling it for $6,000 or some ridiculous thing like that. They just By the way, it was Tokyo Shock had Latitude Zero. It came to me a little bit ago. I just wanted to get that out there. They were the ones who released Latitude Zero. They have a lot. They used to, at least. I don't even know if they're still around. They used to do a lot of the more obscure kaiju movies, and I did buy a number of them from them. So that's another DVD company that might have some of these obscure kaiju movies that I've talked about sometimes on the show. Tokyo Shock.
I wanted to bring up something else too. We noticed we've been getting some interaction and comments on these videos, which is awesome. I know Bill and I are going to make a point of checking for comments somewhat, every so often and reply if we see something. We've done that a little bit. Now, Bill and I, since it's not our channel, we don't actually get notifications if there's a comment.
Right.
So we have to actually go in and look. But we're going to try to reply. And you know what? Tell us if you've seen these movies, what you think of them. Maybe throw out some of your obscure movies. There's a gentleman been doing some commenting. He's been throwing some lists of movies out there, which is very much appreciated. I've seen a lot of them, but I didn't comment in detail to his comment. But I've seen a lot of them, but I haven't seen all of them. And he had some good choices too. So we loved getting the interaction.
Yeah, because we haven't seen everything.
Nope.
No, we haven't.
I mean, and there's so much out there that could have just been off our radar for whatever reason.
I would say, to be funny, between the three of us, we've probably seen everything, but no, we haven't. Not even close.
Right.
You would think. I've done research on this. There's something like 250,000 movies that come out every year.
Wow.
I mean, there's no way
you're about maybe 50 of them, right?
Yeah, I know, right? If you're lucky. I mean, that's according to like IMDb, I think is where I got that statistic. So that might include a lot of international films too, but still, majority of films are done in Hollywood, even around the world. There's more done in Hollywood than there is everywhere else combined. But still, there's a lot of movies.
There are a lot done in India.
Yeah, well, that's true. But for numbers anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again for sticking around for another year, Gary and Bill. and everyone out there that's watched our videos, like they say, like, comment, subscribe, share,
Yep.
all of the above, interact, all of the above, because it'll show that we're making some sort of an impact on people out there.
That helps the algorithm too on YouTube, so that you get put out in front of more people. Yeah. Which is why, so many people make fun of, the fact that everybody asks for, likes and stuff like that. But it's how you get your stuff seen. And that's how the system works.
And a majority of the stuff that we talk about is literally the more on the obscure side.
Yeah.
Than other channels that I've watched, So,
right.
That's why I kind of wanted to focus that way than being another one of those, because there's only so many times you can explain the Halloween movies or Friday the 13th, there's only so many times, after a while people go, yeah, okay, this person's talking about that movie. Heard it 1,000 times, pass. But that's why I wanted, the cult classics, the kinds of movies that mostly no one would go for. And should, because I honestly think that between all three of us, the movies that we put out are very watchable and should be watched by people that claim to love cult classic movies.
I agree. And
just because it's
we each bring our own flavors and our own areas of film, which gives a pretty wide range of stuff, I think.
It does. We don't have a lot of overlap, which is good, I think. No, I think it works.
Exactly. I agree.
That's perfect. All right. Well, by the time people see this is going to be January 17th. So, again, like we said, just like, comment, subscribe, share, comment, just do the whole,
tell your friends.
All of the above. Tell your friends. Share it with your friends. If you,
tell your enemies too. What the heck? We'll take that.
Yeah, anybody.
I could do a show on movies you should have your enemies watch. Actually, some of the worst. Release mentions.
That might be a good one.
But I mentioned a few.
Oh yeah. All right, guys. Well, it's been a blast, and I'll talk with you soon.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you very much for watching this episode. And stay tuned for the next one.